Okay, in this video we're going to look at, as it says here, factoring trinomial where the leading coefficient is not 1. So we're going to look at a method that should always work. In fact, this method works for all trinomials, but it's much easier when the leading coefficient is not 1. So normally we use this just when the leading coefficient is not. First of all, this is a general form trinomial. Ax squared plus bx plus c. I'm sure you've seen this before, particularly when looking at the quadratic formula. And when you're given a trinomial in that form, here are the steps to factor it when the leading coefficient is not 1. First, find the product of the first and last coefficients. That would be ac, so a times c. Then you take that number and find two factors of it that add up to give the coefficient of the middle term, b. And the third step, rewrite this trinomial, and it's simpler than it sounds here, with the middle term broken into two terms using the factors that we found in step 2. Then once you do that, we go and we use our grouping method to factor the trinomial. And of course, I always recommend that you check your factoring using the FOIL method to multiply it back out. So let's look at a trinomial. Check point 5. We have a trinomial where the leading coefficient is not 1. And remember, this corresponds to a trinomial of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. So with this trinomial, a would be 6, b would be 19, and c would be -7. Okay, so the first step is to find the product of a and c. So a is 6, so that's going to be 6. C is -7. You multiply those two and you get -42. And it's important that you keep track of the sign. This is -42. Don't just take 42. Use the negative. Okay, the second step, we're going to look for factors of this product of -42. We want to find a pair that add up to give b, or the coefficient of the middle terms that add up to give +19. I'm going to try, when I see 42, usually I think of 6 times 7, so let's try that. Let's try 6 times 7, or actually, the negative we have to take into account here, so 6 and say -7, add those two together, and we end up with -1. Okay, that's not equal to 19, so we're not going to use that pair. You know, when you find a pair, I would consider switching the signs around, you know, if it's negative. Or, I mean, if this number is positive, you might take two factors that are negative. You could use two positives, give a positive, multiply two negatives, give a negative. In this case, so let's try switching the signs. -6 and 7. -6 times 7 is also -42. But when we add those, you see you get +1, which is also not equal to 19. So, you know, you want to consider all factors, even starting with 1 and 42, or rather -1 and 42. Those could be two factors that might work in some cases. And, you know, if you run through a few in your head, I think you'll see that, you know, pretty quickly you can come up with a couple of factors. I'm going to try, let's say, 2 and 21. Okay, or 2 actually we'll have to use a negative, so let's say 2 and -21. Those multiply to give -42. When you add them, you get -19, which is similar, but it's not equal to 19, so that's not going to work. Let's try switching the signs around. Let's use -2 and a +21. If you add those two, we do get 19. So those two should work for us. So let's try it. In the third step, we're going to rewrite this polynomial with a middle term using these numbers. So 6x squared, we're going to leave that. We're going to take 19x and write it as -2x plus 21x. And if you had done these in the other way around, 21x, negative 2x, you'll still get to the same point. So you don't have to be concerned about the order of those. And then I have the negative 7. All right, so I rewrote it. Okay, now do this using grouping, the fourth step. So we're going to group these two terms together and the second two terms, or rather the third and the fourth terms. All right, so we group these together. You can see they have an x in common. They also have a 2 in common. So let's take a 2x out. And what we're left with here is 3x. Over here, in order to get negative 2x back, we would need a negative 1 here. Okay, so that's the first part. Now let's look at these two terms. There's no x in common, but there's a 7 as a common factor, so we'll take that out. Plus 7, since it's a plus here, we'll do the plus. What we're left to get this back, we need a 3x, and over here we'd need a negative 1. Okay? These are the same, so now we can factor that out. And what you're left with would be 2x plus 7 times 3x minus 1, and that should be the answer. But we should check it using FOIL. So let's do that. Multiply the first terms, and we're going to get 2x times 3x, 6x squared, because it's our first term. Multiply the outer terms, so be 2x times negative 1, we're getting negative 2x. Multiply the inner terms, 7 times 3x gives you 21x. And multiply the last term, 7 times negative 1 gives you negative 7. If you simplify that, we get 6x squared. Put these two together, we have plus 19x minus 7. So that does check, and so these would be our factors for that polynomial.